And at this point in time, I can't tell you. So those are some of the issues we saw. Again, some of the reasons for those issues, it still remains federally illegal to import seed for private individuals. Again, I mentioned about the lack of 30-day notice, and that's really mostly because of inexperience at grower level. We never thought that anybody was trying to say, geez, I actually had somebody that said, I'm calling you because my seed's falling on the ground, I think it's ready to harvest. And it's like, yeah, it's a little late now, but we'll try to get somebody there to help out on that 30 days. So, we understand that some of this is all new to everybody, and we'll continue to try to work with those situations. Federal funding has jeopardized an institution of higher education, has made it very difficult for them to fully participate. Very difficult. The landscape for them to navigate is, I can only guess, even harder than what the landscape for us to work with DEA. So, ambiguity and misunderstanding of the rules. What do the rules mean and how do I read them? And a desire to compare us to Canada and Kentucky when it's convenient.
Right.
And forgetting about what those differences are in the laws of those states and what they have to, what their legal landscape is. So by comparison, what we're not Canada. Why are we not Canada? Because if we started out being Canada, you'd have to recognize that we'd all be wearing handcuffs right now, because it's federally legal there, it's federally illegal here. So plantings limited to certified varieties, tested and proven, that produce that below 0.3 THC. And marijuana possession still is criminally illegal. That last one's important, as what we are is Kentucky. Hemp cultivation is authorized as part of a 5-year research study. It's not commercial, it's not like we have here at all. Applications start out by being reviewed by the state police. Background checks for all applicants and workers are completed at the applicant's expense.
No.
Before an applicant is done, it's done by the Kentucky State Patrol. They're not dealing with the Ag Department first. Planting is limited to seed provided by KDA to institutions of higher education or selected farmers through an MOU that makes them part of that institution of higher education. And that this year amounted to about 20 acres. So, again, I know we can't tell you that how many acres we have, but I can tell you that we have more than 20 acres in the state of Colorado.
Dwayne, could you explain the 10-year exclusion? What does that mean?
Felony.
The 10-year exclusion, if you are
A felon.
if you are your
Convicted.
renewal is, if your license is denied, if you're found to have been convicted of a felony, you can't get back into the program for 10 years.
It's just a pot felony, isn't it? Or is it
No, it's any felony.
It's
It's anything.
You seen Ron?
Yep, back in the corner.
Oh, I knew you. How are you all?
We're good.
And again, marijuana possession remains criminally illegal. I can't tell you how much easier that landscape is to negotiate as you're trying to write rules. The things they don't have to be concerned about are just vastly, vastly different. So what's next? We want to work toward a seed certification program to improve the seed quality so you get what you pay for and what you expect it to be. So if you're expecting it to be below 0.3, you ought to be assured that the variety that you're buying, if it's a certified variety by the state, is going to produce something that's below 0.3. I would tell you that's also important for us, because we don't really want to go out and do any more testing than we have to. And if we get to a certified seed program, our test should be looking at the label to make sure that the label matches how many acres you've got. You've got enough acres to plant, and we aren't taking samples down to our lab, except in the varieties that aren't certified at this point in time, are still in development. So that's really where we want to get to. The next one is kind of ties in with that. CU and CSU and the Colorado Department of Ag have kind of joined and both schools call it something different, so I'm going to use the term organization for lack of better wording. have tried to find a way to create a legal landscape that gives them the ability and us the ability to support that research in a way that doesn't jeopardize their federal funding as much and allows them to generate revenue within each university and together for joint research. That a good way to put it?
Perfect.
Develop tools to gather the vital information for the development of the industry. Again, back to that, which varieties do well, how many acres do we have, what's it being used for. Clarify some of the issues during registration process and enforce the reporting compliance that we've set forth. And look at rule and legislative changes necessary to more effectively address some of the situations we've encountered. So, some of the rule changes. Again, we're going to clarify some definitions of R&D. So, first one, I'm going to pop both of these up. What does commercial mean? Commercial is the growth of industrial hemp by any person or legal entity other than an institution of higher education or under a pilot program. And research and development then becomes basically Farm Bill compliant language. Okay? Again, the first thing everybody's going to say is, boy, what does that do? I've got an R&D registration. I want to be doing research to develop my variety. Doesn't mean you won't still be able to do it. The language, this rule still meets those registrants' needs that are R&D but want to do it for commercial gain. You still have the opportunity to do it. It doesn't change anything in the legal landscape of how you do it, on how you have to go about it. It just clarifies what you're going to do with it. So, so I'm going to walk through an analogy that I apologize for all those people who have called in and asked about this. I'm going to walk through it in person again. You'll see the steps. So what's R&D and what's commercial? Anybody got a guess on which one of those is R&D and which one of those is commercial? They're both R&D. They're both in a commercial setting. So in 1960, Ford Motor Company kind of came along and they had a bunch of drawings and they were trying to figure out what to do with those drawings. In about 62, they developed some concept cars. And then in 64, they launched the Ford Mustang. Every year since, Ford still has an R&D program. As best of my knowledge, Ford Motor Company is not purely an R&D company, and that R&D isn't shared with Chevrolet or BMW or anybody else. They're still doing research the same way our applicants can do research. You're just going to do it in a commercial setting. Okay? We're going to clarify what these are some of the definitions. Registrant and registration, and more than anything, that's for clarity purposes. I get asked a number of times by other states, by the governor's office, how many registrations do you have? The next time I'll get, how many registrants do you have? And it's like, okay, I gotta make sure everybody gets on the same page here, and it will be important as we go through the rest of the rules. Clarify costs, and what does that mean? This is really more of an administrative thing, and this is really to make sure that if there's costs involved, it doesn't mean that we never defined how long it was, because we figured normal business practice, if you're doing business someplace, you send somebody a bill, you expect them to pay for it. That's not always been the case, so we'll have to spell it out in rule. Registration transfers. This is really one that's important for a couple of reasons, and it mentions down here, this has been one of the concerns law enforcement has had, and it goes back to that, how do you evade, how can you use this program for evasion of marijuana? So we looked at how can we give you, again, a legal landscape to assure those law enforcement people that you're not using these registrations to grow marijuana, you're using them to grow hemp. So if somebody were to have a marijuana field, circle pivot of marijuana out there, 30 days before we send you a sampling notice or send them a sampling notice, and they say, ooh, man, I'm going to be caught here. I got to respond to the department within 10 days to let them know that I have I've gotten their letter and we can arrange sampling. Or I can transfer that registration to somebody else and they've got 10 days to let us know that they got the registration. Now all of a sudden we're inside that 30-day period that we need. And so that free transfer of a registration meant that somebody that was not ever in compliance, was not ever intending to be in compliance, could evade, and that's been a concern of law enforcement. So we're trying to address that right here so that, again, you can be assured that we can say to the DEA or whoever that is, no, if they're registered with us, you call us, you tell us who it is, we can verify that they are doing hemp. No plants shall be included in more than one registration. This, again, is really important. We've had a number of registrations where people, or questions, can I have an R&D registration and a commercial registration? And then it's like, well, what good would that do for you? And it's been, well, I could use this part of the R&D and I could use this part of it. And it's like, no. It's not the higher standard. We've held everybody to the lower standard then, if you want to. And so to clarify, to make sure everybody is on the same page, one registration, one plant. You can't move it from one location to another. There's no hide and seek. Define what plant shall be included in a registered land area. I'm going to take a sip. So, no registered land area may contain cannabis plants or parts thereof that the registrant knows or has reason to know are of a variety or type that will produce a plant that, when tested, will be more than 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis. And no registrant will use such material for purposes associated with the cultivation of industrial hemp. Okay? This really comes right back to what does Amendment 64 say? And you'll see the slightly bold up there. It says, industrial hemp is defined and regulated separately from marijuana. So this is really our attempt to make sure that we're fulfilling not only the constitutional requirement of what 0.3 is, but the legislative and the constitutional mandate of how we have to keep them separate so that we can regulate what we have the authority to regulate. Okay? The department, again, doesn't have the authority to grant possession or use of cannabis above 0.3%. That's reserved with the Department of Revenue or CDPH&E. And if you are interested in breeding in those materials, you just have to register with them. You just have to figure out which program you're working in. It is not me telling you which program you can work in. Figure out what your plant material is and then just register accordingly. The setbacks, and this is another one that I really would encourage you to let me know if there's a better way we can go about this. Now this is a case, and that's really what this meeting is about on all these rules, but this is one we've struggled with, and I think the advisory committee can say we talked about it there and we struggled with a little bit. We're trying to figure out a way to make sure that we don't have cross-pollination between marijuana and hemp that exceeds then the limit of what our jurisdiction is. We're doing that for a couple of reasons. One is to make sure that we have the rules in place that we can, again, demonstrate to people that what you're doing is industrial hemp and it's not marijuana. The material falls under our jurisdiction, and we can reassure that when somebody calls that